You have a complex code base, and now you can start adding capabilities on top of that for the first time that used to take months or even years to days or weeks. Andrew, thank you so much for being here. So, longtime founder and CEO of Jellyfish, world-class expert at measuring developer productivity. Can you just give us a couple sentences on what is Jellyfish? Because this is such a ripe time for your company.
Yeah, and ditto for Blitzy. Yeah, thank you for having me here. I'm co-founder CEO of a company called Jellyfish. We're based here in Boston. We help companies in the dev AI transformation. Right. Companies right now are in this moment where they're trying all the dev AI tools, and they're suddenly figuring out, like, how do I actually understand what's changing in my organization? How do I get telemetry in the transformation of change, right? How do I adopt these tools better? And so we come at it from working with over 700 customers, helping them actually drive dev AI productivity across the organization, and figure out how to efficiently use these tools that I think we're all super excited about.
And we love platforms like Jellyfish, especially Jellyfish, but any measurement of developer productivity, because as you know, Blitzy is an autonomous software development platform built for the enterprise. We are starting every major development sprint, the enterprise, with Blitzy, and then we have the AI development lifecycle, which we'll talk about here, which is, the other tools like Cursor and Claude Code that we're executing localized development or completion-based development to ultimately get the enterprises much, much faster. So this is going to be a fun one. You might be one of the foremost experts because you spent the past, let's say, 8 years solely focused on measuring developer productivity and like a lifetime being a productive developer. So a lot's changed in the past couple of years. So just like paint the landscape of thinking about developer productivity, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've had quite a journey. Thanks for having us here, by the way. I think developer productivity is a super important part of it, especially in the lens of dev AI, right? If you look at the journey historically, I mean, I was trained an engineer. In some ways, productivity is such a loaded word. Everyone's like, I don't want to be measured, this whole thing. And we're creative artists, which I am. We are, right, on this thing. But inevitably, as an industry, we are all being measured anyways, right? CFO does it just very coarsely on this stuff. But I think there's been a journey through this around, like, how do you think actually about measurement of this stuff? And I think one of the things that actually happened in the last few years has been dev AI has actually caused people to start thinking more hard about this, right? Because if we're giving more work and more load and more acceleration with these tools, like, well, what does that mean, right? How do we relatively look at that? And it's been a journey. It is holistic and there's many facets to it, but I think there's been a few things that have popped up in the last few years. So I'll give you a framework. Look, if you talk to your average engineer, they were saying, hey, I'm not just a line of code. I'm more than this. There's hard lines of code. There's easy lines of code. There's frameworks. There's all of these things. But if you look at an organization writ large, there are patterns, there are flows. And so what we've actually seen that I think the industry right now is really aggregated on is looking at throughput in a least common denominator perspective. Things like pull requests are a great starting point. Is it perfect? No. Right. But if you look at our organization as a system, and all the different ways that people work in terms of patterns, the good part of the last 20 years is we've actually found source control patterns and pull requests represent a throughput measure for organizations, right? As imperfect as it is, if you historically doubled your staff and your PR throughput isn't coming up, well, let's ask what's going on here, right? Those have been challenges that I think at least gives you a glimpse into this. As a leader, as a manager, it actually helps you diagnose something to go look at, right? Hey, we're seeing a non-change here, we're seeing an acceleration here, let's figure out what's going on. It might give you something to kind of pose in there. Now, I think recognizing PRs are imperfect, right? Some folks might look at ticket tracking system throughput. Some people like to look at say-do commitment on a sprint basis. Some people like to look at essentially percentage of roadmap. These are all different forms of productivity measure here. But I think pull requests probably represent the simplest one that actually kind of fits in most organizations today. It's just a glimpse on this stuff. Now, another thing that I think that's worth looking at in a time of AI transformation is if you look at the last year's DORA reports, right? And I think DORA has been really influential in the industry to help people think about how do we look at a healthy, accelerated dev organization, right? One of the addendums they really introduced this last year was they actually revisited an old acronym called VSM. So I think VSM historically was value stream management,
Yep.
but they've kind of recast it as value stream mapping.
Yep.
And what they're really looking at is like, if you look at software development as a life cycle, think of it as a sequence and a process, right? I think their key point is actually looking at instrumenting the SDLC to look at specific impediments, right? And so one of the things we've learned as an industry when it comes to AI is that if we get faster one part, we're going to cause slowdowns of the other.
Shift to the bottleneck.
Exactly. And so you really have to think about this as a holistic system. So you might have some stuff coming out of roadmap system that hits a ticket tracking system. Some people get in the IDE, they do some coding, they push a PR, someone reviews it, the PR hits CI, they might merge it, it might run through some code scans, they might hit CD and deployment, it might get feature flagged to get turned on for customers. You might generate a crash or not on these things. You might generate more usage. That might be a company's SDLC today, right? And so as we kind of start embracing a lot of these dev AI tools, you might get code assisting tools that help you just code a lot faster.
Not the bottleneck.
Not the bottleneck anymore. But then all of a sudden you're shoving lots of code into pull requests. You might have a huge number of them. I might be asking you, hey, Brian, can you review this, review this, review this, review this? Right? So suddenly now you're the bottleneck on that stuff. Maybe we start bundling them better. Maybe it shifts, right? Maybe it'll push us down and we get stuck on a continuous integration problem where we don't have enough compute to run the test suite on these things because we've chopped it up too many times. And so I think what DORA is really saying is we actually have to instrument all the parts of the system to figure out where the bottleneck is shifting to. It's also hand in hand where I think we're going to see a lot more innovation in the dev AI space. I think we've only started, touching, the surface part, which is the IDE, coding assistance, maybe in the command line, finding some agentic tools there. We kind of moved it a little bit to the code review side. So you see a lot of code review agents on that stuff. Those things are actually adding more comments. They're actually not helping you push them through faster. We still have the whole rest of the SDLC that's innovation to come, right? But back to your earlier question, I think pull requests kind of represent the middle for a lot of folks. It's the least common denominator to look at. And I think that's where everyone's scrutinizing today. It's just a best, like when I look across an organization, you might have different workflows, but that's the one we're still linchpinning on. So I think today that's the answer. I think if you ask me in a year, it may shift again.
It almost certainly will. It almost certainly will. Right?
Because one of the things that actually is happening is as we start using more of these agentic tools, we're starting to see these really, bigger balls of code that need merging, right? If you look at some of these agentic tools today, the promise is get rid of the scut work, do the things that are around maintenance, upgrading, right? Versioning. So you might dispatch, hey, go fix this ticket, go do that thing. Agents go off, do some stuff, it comes back. All of a sudden, you now have this code that you got to figure out what to go do with, right? And so the pull request, even as a construct, is problematic. Because when I used to write the code, I'd ask, hey, Brian, will you look at it?
Exactly.
But if I dispatch an agent, it comes back, well, maybe I should review it. Maybe you should review it.
Maybe you should review it at least once. You're right.
So
give it to me.
So the question is that flow I need to change. How do we actually adopt it? And that's a thing where I think that is part of the zeitgeist right now, revisiting what that actually looks like today.
We're seeing a couple of things. The pull request as an atomic unit has changed. And the reason it's historically, and for some organizations remains today, one of the more reliable measures of throughput is because a pull request was more or less the equal amount of work, within a standard deviation, right? And we're seeing that change dramatically with sort of AI code gen.
And you see this, just like think about it from a human perspective. Let's say we were just humans coding on this stuff.
That'd be very old-fashioned of it.
Yeah, old-fashioned. Yeah, old school. But if you gave me 2,000 lines of code, I would sit there and go like, hey, break it up.
Come on.
Right, like it's too much, too much. I can't ingest it. And so the challenge now is the AIs can produce this much faster, much bigger on these things that are actually pretty great. And so I agree that the whole question of what does that construct represent is changing, right? I actually look at it as that construct is now proxy for responsibility.
That's right. That's exactly correct.
Like, and so it used to be like, hey, eyeball this for me so I can get a second set of eyes. But now it's turning into like, hey, am I willing to take responsibility for whatever this change actually is? And so my theory on this is actually now starting to shift towards what does validation and testing really mean? So I can actually feel more confident around taking responsibility. In some ways, this is back to, this old discussion around code coverage, unit test coverage, integration tests. We're back to that again. And you really see this in the like evolution in dev AI, like we are now focusing much more on writing specs and plans because those represent like the validation points, right? And so the richer we can make that, the better the actual outcome is on that stuff. So in some ways we're revisiting where we were 20 years ago on this stuff. It's just a different medium on the other side of this stuff.
Totally. Right? And the spec becomes this, at least the source of truth against the intent, right? Which you used to have, the human used to be iteratively adding intent, but now you can add so much more intent, you really need to go back to specs. And so we see, we sort of look at the SDLC across these enterprises, and the enterprise developer is 4 key functions to getting to pull requests. Typically it's, system understanding is what they're responsible for, which is why the longer you've been there, the faster that you can move. You sort of know what touches what. And after that, it's impact analysis, being, okay, well, like I understand the system, I'm going to write this function. What are the services that it touches, and is it going to change anything amongst these services, right? Both of these 2 things, most AI code gen tools are very bad at because they are only looking at sort of the local context within the window locally, which has nothing to do with what's relationally relevant. Right? And then sort of phase 3, which is local code gen, which used to be the bottleneck for delivery amongst these 4 things, and that's no longer the bottleneck. It's not the easiest thing to do, right? And then for system validation, which you're talking about, humans are a part of that system validation. So is code test, so is integration test, so is unit test. So sort of end-to-end system is like, obviously how Blitzy designed its system to operate, knowing like the bottleneck has shifted, and writing a lot of code really fast is no longer going to be what drives enterprise development velocity at the top scale.
Oh yeah, and the other half of what you're saying too is in that transformation, you really are shifting roles, right? And implicitly, you just defined what someone's responsible for. Well, we shaped this whole definition of architects, product managers, and all of these things based on, some variations of those responsibilities you talk about. I think in this new world, when the actual coding is no longer the impediment, we're going to have to repackage and redefine all these roles, right? And I think the biggest challenge for most organizations in the transformation is no longer just the coding tools. Like we've seen in the last year how fast adoption's actually picked up this stuff. Like I think we're looking across our data sets where we're seeing like the companies are now at 90-something% adoption. There's no longer the challenge around adoption. The challenge now is actually thinking about like, how do you effectively drive change across these things, right? How do you actually get people to shift and use these tools more effectively, right? Whether it's choosing the right tool for the job or understanding impacts of what they actually do. And that requires telemetry and understanding what's actually changing. But it's a big part of human transformation. That is the harder part here, right? It's not the exciting part. We all want to talk about the tech, which the tech is cool. I would actually argue the tech is ahead of the human process role transformation that needs to happen.
We see this over and over and over. And so like when you probably have the same conversations with these enterprise CIOs and CTOs, it's like, I will not sell you this software unless we are aligned that the change management is going to be both hard and worth it. Right? Because that's the only reason we won't be successful, because the development flow is going to be different this year than it was last year. And it's going to be different next year than it is this year. And so like we need to have buy-in that we are going to be adopting an agentic software development lifecycle. That is what we're doing, right?
Well, so I think there's a couple challenges that I think we all face as an industry. One, the AI DLC is being invented on the fly. Right? Like in the sense that it is changing, dynamic on this thing. So it's hard for organizations to say exactly what they're going to, because it's being written as we go on this stuff. The second part is, look, if it's one individual, that's easier. Right? Because
5,000 developers.
Right. And it's not just 5,000 developers. It's the line that is, what is the line between a product manager, program manager, an architect, an engineer, a designer, a quality assurance specialist? Like those are constructs we built over the last 20 years where we've actually bundled all the responsibilities into those words. Some of those responsibilities are going away. Some of them are actually getting harder. Some of them get repackaged, right? One of these we're seeing is really what is an architect, what is a product manager is deeply changing. Right? Because, if you look at effectively using these tools, you spend a lot of time writing specs and plans. Okay. So the question is, who writes specs and plans, right? So for a lot of fresher companies, that's actually coming out of the architects, right? Because they're the ones designing this part of it. Well, if you look a generation ago, I would say the product managers wrote the specs, right? They're still largely a spec, whether a spec is driving humans or spec is driving AI, it's still a spec. And so the question is, those roles are suddenly overlapping, right? So does product management shift further left and go more in the field?
Yeah.
Do these roles combine? Like, this is the enterprise transformation that is hard,
Yep.
right? Because these two people probably not going to duke it out because it's not quite that simple, right?
Different budgets, by the way.
Yes.
Different responsibilities, different promotion paths.
It is the same budget. I think in a traditional finance accounting, they're all R&D.
Yep.
Let's say in a bank, though, they're actually in different hierarchies.
Yep.
Right. So that's complicated, right? I think this is where you actually look at the fresh companies have a huge advantage, right? Because if you and I are starting a company tomorrow, we're not going to have the debate.
Yeah.
We're just going to be like, we used to hire, our first product person at 10 engineers.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't hire them until your 15th engineer. Yep. Right. So we're not having the debate. We don't need to. We're growing into this, right? Yeah. I think organization transformation have a much harder part, which is like, how do we decompose the roles? Yeah. All the while, the tools are changing.
Yeah.
The bottlenecks are moving.
Yeah.
Right. So I actually almost think that in order to see that transformation happen, you need to see more stability actually happen.
Yeah. Well, I could say like we're in the sort of front line of the transition here. So traditionally, there actually was a lot of friction between product written user stories and engineering accepted requirements, right? And so there's this like Jira engineering grooming process that would happen to like a story written in a vacuum is not that helpful if it doesn't understand inherently the underlying constraints of the code base, right? And so like what we see people doing all the time is that it will start with the product person, right? And the product person will define their requirements. They'll run it through Blitzy, they'll do the deep research in the code base, and it will then nest the epics and user stories with the engineering acceptance requirements. And they're now handing something off to the architect where he's like, oh my gosh, like you guys have actually considered all the system constraints, and then they can take their intent, which is so much more clear, and then turn it into a larger spec. So it's actually the product and architect handoff is actually getting easier than it used to be.
In some ways, we've set a world where we're asking people to write it down beforehand, which helps.
Yeah.
Right. And then the robots can do more to actually synthesize the two together. But it is, look, end of the day, we started the conversation talking about productivity.
Yep.
And we used pull requests as a discussion point, as probably the least common or best proxy today of looking at this for relative change across the organization. I think if you actually step back, like one answer is like we have to look at the SDLC to look at holistic change. Yeah. But you go one even further, you actually have to talk about outcomes. Yeah. Right? Like we are investing in software engineering teams and product teams and R&D teams to generate some kind of outcome. Yep. Right? The code artifact in some ways itself is even a proxy itself. Yeah. Right? Probably we're going to end up in a place where you ideally would look at the holistic picture, which is, are you trying to drive more usage? Are you trying to drive customer retention? Are you trying to drive new sales? Like that is actually the ultimate measure of these things. Now, I think it's going to be a little while before we can bring those all in. Yeah. But you and I were just riffing earlier, like what actually happens, click a few years down the way. How does that actually manifest on those things? And I think we're all evolving really quickly around what happens here.
And we're just managing different and higher abstraction layers, right? Like at the end of the day, what you're talking about is the
most business,
which is ultimately like when you funnel it down, like the SDLC is a very small microcosm of the business value creation.
No, I like what you said around the constructs, right? I think there was, look, someone gave me this analogy, which it's not revolutionary, but it's like, hey, no one codes machine level code anymore.
Totally.
Right? Like we're not doing assembly, right?
COBOL used to be for business people. Right. Like it's like, you're not writing assembly, like get out of here, right? Like,
so we're just coming up higher up the stack, and like we spent 20 years thinking coding itself was the challenge.
Yeah.
Where coding is the manifestation, but it's not actually like, it's just like the bits, right?
Yeah, I mean, we grew up with scripting languages, right? Like, and like that was fine, right? And the C developers were like, boo, and
it was me, man.
Oh, sorry, you look great. You're younger, you're older than you look.
No, but I agree. Like we keep coming up with stack, and I think what the real art now is, to your point, I actually think you have to write more robust specs. Yeah. Right.
Or at least work with the machine to write and work through spec together, right?
Yeah, it's like and I think that's a big part. I mean, the other half of this too, though, is like I do think the hand in hand is this, tools, process, roles, like transformation have to go in lockstep on these things. Yeah. I think the really important and hard part, like that we look at, is like having the telemetry to watch the change.
Totally.
Is really important, right? Like for us at Jellyfish, we look at like, can you get the actual instrumentation to see what is changing across the system, right? Because it could be something micro, which is that tool doesn't work for that code base or team. Yep. Or it could be like, hey, you have big bottlenecks because your whole pull request idiom is broken on that stuff.
And there's sort of never been higher demand to answer this question, because it used to say, okay, well, like let's say we're spending X on developer tooling, right? And then we're spending 1000X on developers, right? And so now that's shifting to say, hey, maybe we'll spend 10X previously on developer tooling. Therefore, it matters a lot what is really working here.
Yeah, and I like, look, part of this is, I think there's over focus sometimes on the actual tool.
Yeah,
I'm not saying the tools don't matter, but I think the impediment for a lot of enterprises is the human transformation.
Yep.
Right. The non-intuitive part for this cycle, like if you look at any other transformation cycle in the last 40 years, they take years to play out.
Yep.
Right, because there's humans involved in process change. The interesting part about this cycle is we've been yapping together about this for years.
Yeah.
Like, we look at these tools, they're magical.
Yeah.
So we're like, they have to actually go change everything immediately. Well, they do, but we're still stuck at the human parts of this stuff, which are probably going to be the impediment for a little while, right? One of the things we see across kind of what are the productivity gains across these organizations, across this, and again, if you look at a large data set, if you look at big PRs, if you look at actually what's happening here, we did a study last summer and we looked at what is the throughput change on the days people are actually using the tools. Pretty simple, right? Across all the languages, all the tools, like different, 700 companies, different sizes and stages. And the answer is, the mean shakes out to about 37%. Okay. Again, take that for what it will. It's aggregating a ton of different data. But that in itself is actually progressing from, even 6 months prior to that, it was like 21%. So it's accelerating very quickly. Or quickly coming to the point now where in some ways that's moot because the adoption of these tools are at the 90%. So like there's almost no question of when you're not using it.
Right.
So now you actually start asking, well, what are the effective changes we actually are driving down the way? And I think it's like every 2 months, I think we're looking at different things together on this stuff, right? That's the changing landscape.
Yeah, which is super exciting because, to your point, 12 months ago, you were great if you were an executive and all you did was say use AI tools, right? And like that actually was how you got the the delta, or the sort of the source of alpha was just really being forward and forcing everyone to use AI tools because they worked well. Now they work so well, there's no convincing of using them. It says, okay, great. Like now I have to do the hard work of change management inside the organization of defining what my AI development lifecycle is and having an opinion on that, and then being willing to change it 6 months if there's a dramatic industry shift.
And I think, well, let's get even harder. I mean, I think the challenge that we saw through last year is like, you're right. I think a year ago, everyone was just like, just use the tools, right? Like, and getting people to adopt it. I think 25, everyone did that. Right?
Yeah, that guy, right?
We actually saw a big step function right around April last year where companies just kind of like everyone just picked up their pace and stuff. So was it, the model? Was it the tools? Was it the humans? Probably yes. Yeah. All of the above, right? Like, was it Claude? All these things all happened simultaneously. But there was a step function at that point. The challenge now, I think, for folks is that all through 25, they lit up all the tools. Right? They're using all the flavors of the DevAI tools. They're using the code, all the coding assistants, the command line ones. They're using all of the code review tools. They're using all the agentic ones. Everyone went all the things. I think now we're actually to the point though, like we did all the things. Now we're starting to question like which ones work better for which teams, which code bases, which things. We're refining, right? Are we getting the outcomes we actually want? Let's look at the telemetry. Let's understand that. And I think that's the zeitgeist right now. What's actually happening where like, it's no longer a question. You should use them all. Everyone's around the corner on that. We're using all.
Use which ones where, right?
But use which ones where and which ones are effective for you. And I think, and it's not a one size fits all. I think there is different tools for different personas, different use cases, different languages, different parts of the code base, front end, back end. There's different working idioms, right? I think the IDE-based ones are very good for certain people. I think the command line ones are actually much more freeform and able to do much more powerful things, but it requires new training, different things. And so you now actually have to be much more nuanced as a CEO, as a leader, as an engineering leader around what outcome you're driving, which team, which purpose, which thing. And actually start having those opinions, measurement, driving change, enablement, training, like all of that stuff actually is much more material now because it's not as simple as like, just do it, guys. Now it's like, how do we do it?
So. People like, well, when they first will meet us, they'll get a little bit surprised when I'm like, well, I hope you guys are using Claude Code and Cursor. And I'm like, hopefully you guys have this part of your stack like implemented and using because they're awesome. And they've never met us and they say like, oh, like you guys are you're in code gen. I thought this was like a competitor. I was like, you need them all. Like, let me tell you exactly where you're going to use all of them to get an AI development lifecycle. And like, it's almost like a sigh of relief because it's like, you're like, oh my God, we spent almost 24. And
that's we're doing
pilots.
You
know what I mean? And then we finally got it. And so I thought we were gonna have to change. It's like, well, no, like it's really a do more in the right situation. So like we help people that we categorize it for them, right? You have like the sort of enterprise autonomy tool. Like we're built for scale and large swaths of work, right? And so by definition, you're going to have 24 hours of compute to wait to get a pull request from Blitzy. Like that's not the best tool for lots of situations, right? Like there's lots of situations where you don't want to wait 24 or 36 hours of compute. There's lots of situations when you're like, I have a 3, 4, 5 month project. If I can hack 80% of that off, like that's super valuable, right? And then it's like, we want you to keep the agentic stack, right? Like Claude Code is awesome. We're super users of Claude Code, right? Like for us, we finish out all the pull requests, all of our remaining work, and then you're using your scalpel, you're using your Copilot. It's that stack is 1, 2, 3 is so effective.
I mean, thematically, I think what you're saying is that you need we're no longer like just use any tool. It's the right tool for the right job.
Exactly.
Right? And I think in order to do that, I don't think there's a one-liner that answers them all.
Yeah.
I think it's very people, code base, legacy, implementation, like all of these things, languages, front end, back end, like all these things are dependent on these pieces that I think is custom to the organization. I think the leader of the future, though, needs to understand this mix. Right. There are some times where you want to toss it to you. Sometimes you actually want to do this in the IDE. Sometimes you want to do it in this different IDE. Sometimes you want to do it on the command line. Sometimes you actually want to go write a really rich plan and actually dispatch, a bunch of agentic tools simultaneously on these things. I think there's new playbooks in play. And I think that is the engineering leader. The contemporary engineering leader is to actually have opinions, experiments, test it, measure it along the way. Because there's just like whole new playbooks in play.
So. And we got asked, like, I mean, we're a software company. We sell a platform. We put it in your PPC. You know what I mean? Like the amount of times we're like, well, can we just pay you to also come in and just put on a workshop on the AI development lifecycle? It just speaks to tell everybody like how and when to use these different tools, right? And so we just started saying yes because it was like, okay, like we want you to be as successful as possible. Your success is our success. So let's make that as a part of working together. Let me show you. Use Blitzy at the start of your sprint. Use Claude Code to pick up the pull request. Use GitHub Copilot when you need to do a small script, right? In a localized environment. And like you do all these 3 things together, and like you're no longer thinking about like developer productivity. You're thinking about enterprise development productivity.
I think that is like back to the earlier point. I think this is the holistic question around like you're investing in this organization. You're investing in these tools, but it's for a purpose, right? And so you're looking at productivity writ large, which is how do you get the outcome that you're asking for your customer, whether internal or external, in the best dollar and time way. And I think that is, I don't know. I think it is a new challenge, though. I think being an engineering leader today is much harder than it was. It used to be like, I joke, but it's like, get some yoga balls, get some sodas, and get folks with the right training, and then boom, it'll be great. It's harder than that now. Right.
But it's never been a better time to be an engineering leader. That's sort of like trying to rise up. The ambitious engineering leader right now is the best moment to be alive.
It's the change agent, right? It's the change agent of actually doing the new ways, finding the new tools, understanding actually how to do it. It's in some ways, I think these tools give you new bravery. Right? Because you can dive right into these things that, it's a superpower. You can touch much broader swaths of code, drive much more significant change than you could have in the past. And I think that's a big enablement back there. But you got to wield it appropriately.
And the executive teams that can nail this, which means they can be high and low, right? And sort of deep on the problem set, high on the business objective, have a massive, massive advantage. Even if you're 18 months faster than your nearest competitor at adopting this, like you're going to be able to move so much further than them.
Well, I think I'm going to go second order from that. I think the leaders that achieve that are the ones that can drive change faster. Right.
I mean, they're going to attract the right talent that's interested in that kind of work.
And be able to rip the Band-Aid. We're not going to do it the old way. We're going to do it a new way. Right?
And there's no, it's not just for big tech, right? Like that's the thing is like, we see insurance companies that are unbelievable that 12 months ago, like were like, didn't know what AI meant. Right. They thought it was strictly for algorithms on Facebook. Right. And then 12 months later, through unbelievable leadership, right, that allowed them to have a really AI first development lifecycle that allowed them to continue to get the right talent to come in and want to be a part of it, like completely changed the rate of development, like orders of magnitude difference.
I'm excited to hear it, that you're talking about in some ways more traditional industries being able to adopt this, because I think so much lit is out there around these fresh, amazing young companies that are like from scratch.
Yeah.
The great part is they are moving amazingly fast.
Yeah,
right.
They are totally.
Right. But because they don't have to rethink things, they just do.
Yep.
Right. They just hire and they just do. They're
Yep.
native, which is amazing. But that's not the mass.
Yeah.
Right. That is not the mass. That's not the big middle.
Yeah.
That is the bulk of the industry.
Yeah.
The bulk of the industry are, they're doing traditional stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're doing,
And like it, of course they've been stuck, right? If you've had 6 M&As, right? You've connected six at one time proprietary software systems into sort of one conglomerate operating system, like you run through private equity, you're not going to be able to move quickly on that code base. Right? Yeah. That's like why people come to us, and you finally have a system that will use a lot of compute dollars to get a deep knowledge graph understanding and say, okay, now you're unlocked, right? You have this huge backlog of ideas, right? You have a complex code base, and now you can start adding capabilities on top of that for the first time that used to take months or even years to days or weeks. You feel like you're just like letting these people's ambition like actually come out of them.
It's a shift in mentality.
Yeah.
Right. And the transformation for most of these companies is it's no longer spending the energy on building. It's actually talking about expressing what you want to build and then actually measuring the change that actually gets there. Yeah. Right. And the challenge for I think a lot of organizations is that's a skill set shift and an emphasis shift where we spent 20 years talking actually about the building. Yeah. Now we're actually talking about what to build and how to build. Yeah. Right. And I think that's potentially a knowledge and talent shift. Yeah. And transformation that has to happen on that.
Well, we see. I mean, I've yet to meet a CEO that didn't have a lot of great ideas for driving product changes.
We're the worst. We're the worst. Yeah. Yeah.
But you see chief product officers, they're just so excited because they've had less of a voice previously, but they're the ones that have just been stack ranking. Like I've got 15 different ideas that are going to add customer value that have constantly gotten pushed down because we need to do maintenance XYZ. And so now they can say, okay, great, bring them all. Like, let's get to work, right?
I think we're going to hit a new limit condition though, which is how much change can a customer tolerate?
Right. That is a world I'm very excited about. Right? Because the real question is like, how many problems does a customer have?
Like how much limit, what's the limit condition? And that's like, we're nowhere near it.
Yeah. Not even close.
Right. But I think that is an interesting time where you start thinking about that. And this goes back to my point, which is measuring customer value.
Yep.
Right. Measuring that part of the telemetry. How many deploys can they take? How many feature changes can they take? Those parts of it. You've got to actually measure all the different parts of the AI SDLC here to figure out what's actually changing on
And we've seen like massive enterprise pickup in developer tooling, bringing on developer tooling versus 12 months ago, which is a lot of mid-market folks. And so like, what are you seeing in the enterprise right now for their attempts to sort of measure this well and get from good to great?
I think look, if you look at, in some ways, we look at all the media and the media really covers the leading edge. Yep. Amazing. I think if you look at your classic, Fortune 500 enterprise today, they are behind, right? Like, and again, it's hard to say the whole organization, but like, if you look at some of the larger organizations they're just deploying the first dev AI tool, singular, in 25, mid 25, they were just getting rolled out there, right? That is the current zeitgeist, which is in some ways that's mind blowing for your folks in the arena being like, no way, right? And they're going through the training cycles and all of that stuff today. I think those same people are quickly going like, oh my God, now I got to try Claude and Devin and Cursor and all of these things. And so they're like, I think a year ago, they're like, one tool, we can manage this. Yeah. Now they're actually living in a world which is, okay, I'm getting pressure from the teams because they're trying out something, and pressure from the board, to try out these other things. And then now I'm getting pressure to deploy like 5, 6 tools. And I had one, right? And so in a one tool environment, a lot of these organizations were like, okay, I can handle some telemetry and measurement because they're like, I'm trying one tool in the actual coding assistant space, in the IDE. It really doesn't change my SDLC a ton. Right. And so I'm actually looking at that part of it. So we already have some metrics and measurements in that space. Fine. Wham. All of a sudden it's like, I got 7 tools in play that they want to do these things. I've got, tens of thousands of developers that are trying this, trying that. I've got, 6,000 code bases. Like the matrix is getting out of control here. And so the other challenge is, how do we drive change, right? How do I even measure this matrix of these things? How do I even keep up with all the APIs on this stuff? And the reality here is, my view on this is, I don't think we're going to see a slowdown. Like, I think the next couple of years are going to have just continuous integration on this because like we're still innovating.
Yeah.
Right. As an
We're in the first inning.
We're in the first inning. We just touched, I described AI SDLC as, the IDE is just like, on the left side, inning 2 on this thing, right? We've still got 7 innings to go here on this stuff of other innovation down this stuff. And so I think every time we get innovation, you get new vendors, new innovations, like, and all these organizations are adopting all of these. So I think the next 5 years are just tons of change across these things. And change, vendors, tool spaces, different parts of the SDLC. It's chaos, right? And I think increasingly these organizations are needing more telemetry, right? Because, single metrics are not sufficient now, right? They need to look at all this stuff and are, where they're moving away from actually, in-house built solutions to actually vendor side stuff. Like we have a chance to go help on that part because of the chaos of this, right? We would, some of our customers in a world where they're living with one AI dev tool, totally makes sense. In-house BI tools fit those existing frameworks. As you look at this world of 7,
it's like a multivariate analysis on the SDLC,
right? And that's,
by the way, like the AI code gen companies, like I want them to be Jellyfish customers, right? Because I'm very confident that Blitzy against large code bases is an unbelievable value proposition against it, right? And so all of our existing enterprises today, but it's like, I want you to have every piece of factual data possible.
Because I completely agree with you, because an educated customer that is measuring things will have a clear expression of what value means to them. And they will see the value immediately in that stuff.
And value creation, value capture, the street wants to know about it. Are you adopting AI? What's going on, right? It's like, we're doing it. Here's the things. And like, here's the source.
Here's the yield we're getting. This is why we're using this tool for here and this for that. I mean, look, I think if you look at the olden days of software engineering, it's like when I was growing up, slide a pizza into the box, don't bother Andrew, it'll be fine on that stuff. I think we're in a much richer space now where we actually do care a lot about telemetry and understanding everything from, are we actually moving through the SDLC faster where we're getting stuck, to also, are the individuals getting the resources that they need to actually go do this, right? There's all the things are in play. And I think someone that is actually rich in there will be a better customer, right? Because they're going to understand this tool for this purpose and this yield. And I think that is the crisp thesis that they can come in with. Right? I think that'll be really valuable.
Well, great time to be an enterprise CTO and CIO. They can learn more about the Jellyfish at
jellyfish.co.
Jellyfish.co.
And I don't know, you learn about Blitzy.
Excellent. Well, you know us, Blitzy at blitzy.com. So awesome. Good to come in, man, and excited to do some more work together.
Right on, man. Thank you.